so, because, well, a bodhisattva should know at least if a bodhisattva has taken bodhisattva vow. Maybe it's difficult for a bodhisattva to know how sincerely one has taken it. But at least the bodhisattva would know if formally, let's say, the bodhisattva has taken bodhisattva vow. If a bodhisattva is on the bhumis, I would think they should know. Yeah, if they are on the bhumis, they should know. There's a difference between knowing something and conceptualizing it. But that has to do with the two truths. So a bodhisattva, of course, if you read even the Vajrachedika, ultimately there is no sattva, so there's no bodhisattva, fine. But that's ultimate truth. So there's always the point of the two truths. So, yeah, generally it's better probably to always think that one has to be more sincere in one's practice, but if ever you get to the other chapters, when one actually takes up bodhicitta, in fact, one is encouraged to develop the sense that, yes, now I'm a son of the Buddhas. I have to behave well. So actually, when taking up bodhicitta, it is said explicitly that one develops that kind of sense. So, in a way, yes, one can develop a kind of slightly complex mind, if you wish, but at some point, that also comes into play. That one takes a bodhisattva vow, and then one develops this sense of responsibility by thinking, okay, today I've been born in the families of the Buddhas, and now I have to behave in such a way that this lineage doesn't become stained by my poor behavior. So that means if one has that idea, in some sense, one is self-identifying as a bodhisattva. And if somebody says, oh, then what about no self? Actually, that's confusion, because conventionally we all have certain self-identification. So that doesn't come into play in terms of conventional truth. It doesn't mean that when one studies no self, one stops using one's name and one doesn't use pronouns. It's not like that. That's about ultimate truth. But there's also conventional truth where one uses certain convenient labels. So always, when there's some teaching about the nature of reality, it's based on the two truths, and one should become able to handle the two truths. Handling the two truths well, one doesn't fall into extremes. In fact, it is said that it's better to have a view of self as big as Mount Meru than to make emptiness into a view. So if one develops a kind of grasping at emptiness and takes emptiness as non-existence, that's worse than having a view of self. So one is warned very much that the meaning of emptiness is not non-existence. The meaning of emptiness is dependent arising. So one should develop an appreciation for the middle way. When we read the sutras, we have to be always cautious, always try not to fall into extreme view. That's why the teachings were given gradually. I mean, we have to think that the recipients of the first turning of the wheel of Dharma were not people without skill. They were very, very skilled people. And yet they did not receive extensive teachings on emptiness. And when the teachings of emptiness were given, they were kept secret for many hundreds of years. They were not taught widely for a very long time. Only later the Mahayana was taught widely. It was kept, according to some accounts, many of the sutras were kept by Bodhisattvas who had a separate council, and then only later they were made available in the world. And then in some cases there are specific stories about how specific sutras were transmitted. Like, for example, Arya Nagarjuna is the first treasure revealer because he redeemed the perfection of wisdom in 100,000 lines from the Naga word. And then this became more well known. But this is after a very long time. And then again, the teachings of Buddha nature are taught even in the third turning. And these teachings are, in a sense, even more difficult. Why? Because we might think, oh, then we went back to the non-Buddhist self. If somebody misunderstands the Buddha nature teachings, they can take it as being a permanent self, like the non-Buddhist idea. So for that precise reason, they were taught after teaching about emptiness, because they are in harmony with the teaching of emptiness. So usually there is this kind of steps. And so when we get this kind of doubts about self-identification, these often have to do with handling the two truths. For that purpose, we should slowly improve our view. Perfect view is extremely important. The conduct and meditation without view is not a cause of liberation. So perfect view is very important in the Buddhist teachings. It has many levels. It's something that one can acquire in different ways. Some people can acquire perfect view just from a few words. So that's when people acquire perfect view thanks to some instruction from a teacher that they really trust. And some people need to study to acquire perfect view. Now, in the Tibetan tradition, it is said by, for example, some great Nyingma lamas that people who don't need to study to obtain perfect view are like 1 in a million. So it's not very common. And another great Kagyu Lama this time, I think he said, to think that one can successfully meditate without study is like somebody who does not have arms and does not have legs, who proposes to climb a mountain. Maybe they can do it, but it's much easier if one has arms and legs. So the tradition to develop wisdom in the Buddhist tradition is first through listening, then reflection, and then meditation. And at one point in the process, before one goes to the meditation, one should improve one's ascertainment of the nature of reality. So one important point is to, especially if one is doing vipassana, so some kind of meditation which includes an understanding of the nature of reality, one should be very clear about the object of meditation, because any object of meditation, whether it is genuine or not genuine, will become very vivid in one's mind. If one has a correct object of meditation, that is going to reduce mental afflictions. If one has a wrong object of meditation, that is going to increase mental afflictions. So sometimes they give 3 examples for this. Somebody who is enamored with somebody can very easily see the face of that person, even as if the person is there. So they can have a kind of very vivid visualization. Is that going to increase their affliction? This is an increase of attachment. So raga, dvesha and moha. Or a thief. Let's say someone committed a crime. That person has got fear. That person who's running away because he's going to be caught by the policeman might even see policemen when they're not there very vividly. That actually, though, that very vivid kind of visualization is not going to decrease his defilements. It increases fear, which is a form of aversion. Third example is the non-Buddhist meditators. Non-Buddhist meditators can have samadhi for a very long time on the idea of a permanent self. Does that decrease their ignorance? No, it increases it. Actually, that increases the delusion of a self. The delusion of a self is either innate, what we get even without studying, or it is cultivated. That falls under the cultivated type. So these are 3 examples that actually are meant to answer the question of why we need perfect view, why we need a kind of ascertainment through these stages of wisdom for our meditation to be really successful. But it's true, some people manage just with a few words, and that's also great. That depends from many causes and conditions. The accumulation, one's own accumulation of merit and wisdom. So there are some methods for that, that's okay. But this is to say that view is very important, basically. Okay. Did this answer your question? Okay, any other questions? You can, if you have it now, you can ask today as well.
I have this doubt. After reading Bodhicitta, then one then has this question, I'm sure. How do you know that it has reason in you?
Sorry?
How does one know that Bodhicitta has reason in oneself?
I see.
The meaning of Bodhicitta. Because
Ah.
I worry from this part when you do dedication, you say that may the Bodhicitta arises where it is not yet born.
Right.
Where it is born, that it has not decreased.
I think one should not try to assess that, in my opinion. I think that if one is convinced that bodhicitta is useful, in fact, it's like refuge. How does one know that one has taken refuge? It's the same thing. No, I wouldn't say just faith. No. I mean that even if we say the words of refuge, refuge is something that we take with our mind. So, well, sometimes we have that confidence that we really took refuge, but one is advised to take refuge every day. So the point is, one should improve the level of sincerity of one's refuge and always make it more and more and more sincere, more clear. And I think it's the same with bodhicitta. in the beginning we might have some intention, maybe it's not so clear, so perfect. We take bodhicitta, like we develop bodhicitta, and every day we keep on doing it. Every day we keep mindfulness of bodhicitta. We accumulate all the causes and conditions that don't make it degenerate and that make it increase as much as possible. And we keep on thinking that we can still improve. And day by day we continue taking bodhicitta. Of course, perfect bodhicitta is bodhisattva on the bhumis. The perfect bodhicitta means we have realized emptiness. Like, it's the same thing even for the perfect immeasurables. You remember we studied the immeasurables? There's the immeasurables for people who have not realized selflessness. There's the immeasurable for people who have realized selflessness, and there's the immeasurable for people who have realized emptiness. So even the immeasurables are going to change according to how much we progress in our understanding of the nature of reality. It's the same thing for bodhicitta. Conventional bodhicitta and ultimate bodhicitta should be together. This, if you read the Diamond Sutra, you find them both together. So if you read that bodhicitta aspiration, actually they're immediately put together. That's the ideal situation. Also, even when one has some understanding of ultimate truth, there is still the ability to put the two truths together. That increases, even for bodhisattvas on the bhumis, that becomes more and more perfect. So in other words, it's not like a yes or no situation. It's good to think that one has taken the bodhisattva vow because it's a vow. So in one sense, if one takes the bodhisattva vow, one should have a sense of commitment. Because otherwise one might think, oh well, I didn't really take it, therefore... But on the other hand, it's also good to think that, of course, I'm a beginner, and therefore I have to keep on developing bodhicitta again and again and again. And slowly, as I progress on the path, my bodhicitta is going to be authentic. Now maybe when we are beginners and we take up bodhicitta, for most people, unless it's an exceptional case, but maybe for most people, it's not something entirely even sincere and clear, but it's still okay. We try our best, and slowly, as our practice of immeasurables becomes stronger, and as we have more renunciation, so more equanimity also, then it can become more sincere.
In the context of first being weak and defiant, still, where is the line whether we have a reason in us genuine bodhicitta?
Well, I think if somebody gave rise to genuine bodhicitta, the person would know. If it's really genuine, that means really genuine means with a realization of emptiness.
No, I'm talking about in the conventional.
Yeah, but conventional truth and ultimate truth are deeply interrelated. So I think that a perfect bodhicitta is at that point. Depending what we mean by genuine, but I would think.
Meaning that to a degree where you say to yourself that yes, you're not faking, you are now.
Yeah, but what I was saying is that it's better to think that we are faking it. This is my point. It's better to think that, okay, I've taken the vow, but it's still a little bit fabricated. And then one will come to a point where it's not fabricated anymore, but still it's better to keep on thinking that, okay, it can be improved, it can be improved. Like the point is, the point is not so much to find value in oneself. The point is to find value in bodhicitta. That's the point of the chapter. You see what I mean? I mean, when we develop bodhicitta, is not so much to then decide, okay, now I'm great, I'm a bodhisattva. So I want to know when this is really happening, because earlier I was not so good, now I'm much better, I'm a bodhisattva. That should not be in our mind. Like, we shouldn't think in that way. Rather, we should think that bodhicitta is something really great, and we should do whatever we can to develop it, knowing very well that for a very long time it's likely to be something not perfectly genuine, but it's still worth doing it because it's worth so much. So I think that our focus should not be so much self-evaluation. It's like, well, this is different people might have different ideas, but at least my understanding is that while we should be vigilant of our practice, we also shouldn't be obsessed by evaluating it. That's for all the practices. Any practice we do, whether it is shamatha and vipassana, visualization, whatever it is, we just have to be very patient. It takes time. It's a very long-term project. We're talking, if we are in the Mahayana path, we're talking about many, many lifetimes. So we just take, when we are convinced that bodhicitta is worthwhile taking as a vow, we take the bodhicitta vow every day, knowing that the more we take it, the more we are mindful of it, the closer we are to becoming genuine practitioners. And also, we don't disregard naishkramya, the wish to go out of samsara, because without that, then our bodhicitta might degenerate. So, but I don't think we should worry too much about deciding where am I on my path. I don't think that, that should not be a big concern. This is my understanding. In fact, sometimes if there's like, it's good sometimes if I go to my teacher and then he can see what I do wrong, and then he can tell me, directly or indirectly, because sometimes we cannot see the back of our head. But it's really, I think it's not a point of getting the sense of exactly where one, like, am I on the first bhumi and a half, or I don't think that's ideal. And again, if you want to get an idea, think of the story of Asanga again. How long did it take him to see Maitreya? And it became discouraged only every 3 years. But then just some small encouragement was sufficient for him to again resume, etc. And there are many stories like that. There are many masters who for a very long time, they practice, they get no result, but they never give up. We just continue the practice. But that is the greatest result. That is the point. If we want to evaluate one result, is whether we can be consistent in our practice. So doing the practice itself is an amazing result. If we reflect carefully, how many people practice regularly? Not so many. how many people engage in study, reflection, and meditation? Maybe even less. So if we are able to develop a consistent practice, that should be our focus, I think. The same, and that goes for bodhicitta as well. If we don't become jaded, which means, let's say every day you say the refuge and bodhicitta prayer 3 times. At one point we know the words by heart. Now the difficult part is that at some point we become alienated from the meaning of those words. We start just saying the words because we feel, okay, we have this commitment to do it, but we become alienated. It means they're not so powerful. We don't really think about the meaning. So that's something else that we can try to be mindful of. Like every time we should try to remember what we are saying exactly. Like when we say the word Buddha, Dharma, etc., we should reflect on what we are saying. Sometimes we can read about the great qualities of a Buddha, the great qualities of a Dharma, the great qualities of a Sangha, the great qualities of Naishkramya, the great qualities of Bodhicitta. And then maybe we don't know that we are completely genuine, but let's say after 10 years we know that maybe we're a little more genuine than we were 10 years before. That much we can have some confidence. This we can observe, that if we do this every day, of course not in a week, not in a month, but over the years, if we reflect, then we can observe our relationship to our practice, whether it's becoming more sincere or whether it's going like our mind and the Dharma part ways. This sometimes we can check, but I think we should maybe think in long term. At least this is my understanding from what my teachers told me. Ah. Yeah. Yeah, in a way it's just that. One can take it in front. There's different ways. Basically just that. Like if we say the refuge and bodhicitta in front, let's say here there's an image of Arya Avalokiteshvara, or we can visualize some Buddhas. Or if there is a monk who's a Mahayana monk, one can do it. One can ask, can I please take the Bodhisattva vow, and do it in front of them. But actually it is also allowed with visualized Buddhas or Bodhisattvas that, as far as I know, still counts. It is said when there is the opportunity, then it's good to ask some monk, because we always give some respect to the Sangha. If you are, if actually you are saying this refuge, this includes the Bodhisattva vow. Yeah. Yeah. No, but it's a good question, because in fact there is also a ceremony. It exists. Yeah. There's different styles. There's even, I think, a text by Atisha, Dipankara Shrijnana. He wrote a text. Yes. There's a formal way as well. That's also okay. Like if you like that style, you can find some Tibetan Lama. Sometimes we follow that style, but not usually not exactly that text by Atisha. But anyways, or you can ask some of the monks who have Bodhisattva vow. That's good, out of respect for the Sangha. It's also not a problem to take it more than once. Even the ceremony, some people take it many times. It's really no problem. But in the end, the person who knows whether one has taken the vow or not is the person who takes it. Like, of course, like for example, when we have this kind of reading, we all chant this. It doesn't mean necessarily that I think that everyone who comes here and chants this automatically is taking the Bodhisattva vow. Otherwise, it looks like a trap. Like, once people walk into this room, it doesn't matter what they're practicing, they become Mahayana practitioners. It's like, but it's not like that. Yeah, exactly. Because actually, even the refuge vow, there's some text where it is said, if you don't take it in your mind, it is said that even if you go to the gathering of the highest teachers, famous monks, etc., sitting on very high thrones and in a very ceremonial gathering, many of them in the front are not even Buddhist. Because the point is, do they really take refuge in their mind? That we don't know. So this is one point. We never really know who is practicing what. In fact, it's well exemplified by the life story of Shantideva. You remember? He was called Busuku because he just did 3 activities: eating, sleeping, and going to the bathroom. And everyone thought that he was just an ignorant monk, but he was always meditating, even when sleeping, because he knew how to meditate while sleeping. So we don't know. So in both ways, we just don't know. We cannot. Of course, there are some conventions, like when there is some famous monk who's well respected, we act respectfully. That's fine. That's also because it's good for everyone to have a positive view. That's always good. We don't think, oh, I don't even know whether he took refuge really, so I don't give any respect. That's not what is meant. That explanation is given to tell us that the words are not enough. And in some traditions, refuge is a commitment to practice. In some tradition, when one takes refuge, it means one is making a commitment to practice. Welcome. Practical. Well, there's many different ways. One way, it depends from how your life is, first of all. I mean, different people have different daily lives. So, if one can reduce one's busyness and focus on formal practice as much as possible, that's great. I think if one has got bodhisattva vows, basically one should try to reduce the trivial activities. So, of course, first of all, one should make an effort to reduce the non-virtuous activities. Fine, according to one's ability, and usually it's not an immediate process, like we all commit some non-virtue, we try to reduce our bad habit. Also reduce the neutral activities. Some activities are, maybe they look neutral, it's just a pastime. But pastime also is not so good, because pastime means it's wasted time. Sometimes we need it mentally because we cannot do so much, and that's okay. But slowly we can increase the time when we do something more connected to Buddhism. And basically get any opportunity to practice the 6 perfections. Or if one doesn't feel confident to practice the 6 perfections, do like what the Buddha advised to the king. Develop bodhicitta many times. Like many times during the day, reflect about the benefits of bodhicitta and develop that wish, just that wish, but be mindful of it many times during the day. Of course, everything we study is practical. Chanting is a very practical thing. If we chant, slowly we become more acquainted with the meaning. So, in the beginning, we just chant the sounds. Slowly we learn the meaning. Then we put the meaning and the words together more and more. When we can put it together well, that means every time we chant, we are reminded of the whole meaning and we are reflecting on the whole meaning. So that's how we do the chanting. It's not just about sound. In the beginning, yes, but we are developing a tool to increase our mindfulness. And of course, when we have memorized some verses, what happens is that if you know a verse by heart, even during the day, sometimes it will come to your mind. And then you can reflect on that particular verse. In fact, another thing one can do is just one day, in the morning, one can recite one verse many times, and then decide that today I will focus on reflecting on this particular verse. This is also one way to slowly reflect on the important texts. But in fact, there's more extensive advice on what one should do, which means in some sense putting in the bodhicitta into action, the bodhicitta of setting forth in the rest of the Bodhicharyavatara. Like that is what the Bodhicharyavatara is about. How to practice the 6 perfections, how to guard bodhicitta, so make sure that bodhicitta doesn't degenerate, and how to practice dana, shila, etc. in accordance with bodhicitta. All of this is the topic of the entire Bodhicharyavatara. So, for example, today we came across chapter 6. Chapter 6 is important because it teaches us how not to become angry at others. So, how to practice the perfection of patience or forbearance. And there in that chapter, they give lots of different reasonings that we do when we are not angry, so that our anger will not arise or overwhelm us. So when we do all that reasoning for a long time, then when we meet somebody else and the person does something really amazingly unpleasant, we are not caught off guard. We don't have an immediate emotional response. So, but it's a very extensive advice actually. What we have read so far is mainly just about how to value bodhicitta. Like this, the purpose of this chapter is for us to understand in the first place why we would practice the Mahayana. Which of course is very important, because if we just tag along, then we don't have the intention of bodhicitta. It's doubtful that we are really practicing anything, really. Like, it's still a positive connection, no doubt. It's better than nothing. But in terms of genuine practice, my understanding is that one requires to develop bodhicitta to be genuinely a Mahayana practitioner. So that's the purpose of this chapter, to tell us the entrance into Mahayana practice. And that's already a lot. Like, if somebody can genuinely practice the Mahayana, it's an amazing thing. Okay. You have other questions? Yes? Yes. I should be here, here. So there's here ornament, here there's some ornaments. So the crown, necklaces, here. Then the armlets, the feet, and there's a belt. I thought did I say more than 6? I thought those are 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, that counts as 1. That counts as 1. Yeah, it can be confusing. That's true. Yeah, it's true. We find sometimes that we can find more than one meaning in how Buddhas and Bodhisattvas appear. It's a different way of teaching, because it is explained actually in the Lankavatara Sutra that words are artificial, and not in all Buddha fields there are words. So in the Lankavatara Sutra they mention the Buddha field of Buddha Samantabhadra, where there's no words, they teach through smell. So one learns about the Dharma without words through the sense of smell. And sometimes it's just even the colors or the shapes, etc., etc. So sometimes even if we don't know exactly we don't really get the explanation in words for what different parts of a Buddha image mean. Still, that can have some meaning, which is passed in a different way. So this is one of the values of the Buddha's image. They are of great benefit to many people, even when the people just look at them not knowing, even they don't know what is a Buddha. Even just the position, the meditation position, they say that it's so helpful just to be in the right meditation position, that there is the story that there were some monkeys who were observing some meditators, and just to imitate them they put themselves in meditation position, and by that they attained some samadhi. So the meditation position itself is something valuable. Like the fact that we observe the Buddha, we see that the Buddhas often are in this Paryanka posture. Now we are used to it, but if we think about it, there are some places maybe a few hundred years ago where people never saw somebody sitting in that way. So just seeing an image of a Buddha has a certain value. And this particular form of Arya Avalokiteshvara is called Chaturbhuja, four-arm, or sometimes it's called Shadakshari. Shadakshari means the form which is connected with the six-syllable mantra. So this particular form is very directly connected to the Om Mani Padme Hum mantra. Different forms represent something different, but this form is very directly connected to that mantra. Yeah. Okay? Sorry? Yeah. Yeah. Well, somebody asked that to the Buddha. There's a sutta about that. There is a sutta actually about a soldier. And the Buddha even gets to the point of giving him some advice on what to do if he really has to go into battle. But generally the first advice is, if you can avoid it, do whatever you can to avoid it. So if we have to be involved in some violence, then yeah, we can at least try to avoid getting a very negative mind while doing it. But the first and foremost advice all the time is do whatever you can to avoid it. And usually it can be avoided. In most cases it can be avoided. Like for example, you can avoid becoming a soldier. That's possible. You can refuse to go to war. That's possible. There's you can find several stories of bodhisattvas who just gave up their kingdom, and everyone was shocked. What? They say, yeah, okay, if the enemy wants my kingdom, here it is. Have it. I don't care. So generally it's better to avoid any kind of violent confrontation or anything which is if somebody is a bodhisattva with clairvoyance and the person can see through this clairvoyance that the violence really is going to prevent something much worse, then it's a different case. But if we are ordinary people, usually we don't know, and then it's better to try to avoid non-virtue, especially one which is such a great non-virtue like killing people. So I don't think that generally speaking it's very easy to justify killing people from a Buddhist perspective. I don't think it's too easy. I think it's quite difficult. It's quite difficult. I didn't hear the...
I say that over here, sometimes there's dengue in the vicinity, and then the authorities will come to do fogging of the place. You are required to open the door so that they can do the fogging.
Fogging. I see. Fogging. I understood forking. I couldn't... Oh yeah, I saw it. Yeah, I see it.
Because if I close it and we risk
Yeah, no, I see.
for it, but then the epidemic could happen and more people will be killed. So
Yeah, no, but that's what I was saying regarding mosquitoes. There's a big difference when somebody kills mosquitoes because they bring dengue fever, or when somebody kills mosquitoes because they're annoying. So, yeah, that's very deep. In that case, at least we can make some aspirations for the mosquitoes that are being killed, or we can open our windows to let them escape if possible. This is one way. That
so to open the doors and close the windows so that the kids can come.
I see. That's not nice to the mosquito.
Yeah, but then if they are not killed, they may
Come again.
more people. We don't know. We don't know.
Yeah, that's true. Well, sometimes maybe you can get an explanation from the authorities. Maybe they know better. It's possible. We can hope so. I also sometimes, if the room is big enough, I use some spray which allows them, but the mosquitoes should be able to go out. I know that they're not immediately killed because they still, sometimes they just don't care about it at all. So it's not, they're there before and they're there afterwards. So, but I think we can do some things, like if we have a very big room, we can put some spray before, especially if we keep the window open, so that the mosquitoes don't come even. These will repel them from before. So we can take some preventive measures to avoid the mosquitoes in general. Or same thing for cockroaches or ants. Usually we can do some things to avoid them from even coming. That's usually better. If they come, then yeah, that's an issue. Like cockroaches can bring some infection. So one could think, what do I do if I have children in the house? It's a problem. let's say we have cockroaches in the house and one has got children and they can get infections from the cockroaches, then I heard this explanation that surprised me, but I'm personally not convinced because I didn't get an extensive explanation on this, which is you can ask them 3 times to go away. Third time, if they don't go away, you can kill them.
I have a sharing. Once that there were lots of mosquitoes. I haven't sprayed for many years, so I have no choice. I tried. The more I spray them, the more mosquitoes.
The more you swear?
I spray.
Ah, okay, okay.
I thought that I'm going to spray in 3 days' time. I did it.
Yeah,
In the end, I found a, I have a sharing now. I decided to install the sharing everyday treatment.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe they understand only Sanskrit, you see? Maybe the point is we should talk to them in Sanskrit. Then, but of course, I have a doubt about how much insects can understand when you ask them, could you please go away or I'll kill you? So I'm not sure about that method, but some people follow that method. Yeah, basically I was saying that there's always a problem. We can never be 100%, but we don't practice to feel good about ourselves. So it's not a huge problem. We know that our Shila is not perfect. We know it. Our point should be to have this mentality to improve. When we recognize what we can improve, we try, but not necessarily because we want to feel good about ourselves. That's not useful in the end. Actually, if we have a very good Shila and we become very proud of it, that's actually a big obstacle. It's not, and if we become proud of it and then also we look down on people who don't have very good Shila, then that's even worse. That is really a big obstacle to practice. Whatever, even if we have some small achievement from practice, it's never something that we should use to embellish ourselves. That's really not the point. The purpose is that it should make us simpler. Like if we develop the 3 types of wisdom, we should try to become simpler. Like simplify both outside and inside when possible. Like even outer simplicity sometimes can be very valuable because it can help us to achieve inner simplicity. Like reduce our activities, for example. Have fewer activities, fewer plans also. Not many expectations about what's going to happen in our life. Fewer activities, do them well, especially concentrate on Dharma practice, then it's easier. It becomes easier. If we have lots of activities, it's much more difficult to handle. Then we have to struggle to fit our Dharma practice. Then it becomes the last thing that we do, really. So we can observe our direction, even in terms of whether we are able to increase our practice or not. It's true that formal practice doesn't ensure that we are practicing. Like if we say, when we say, oh, I meditated for 1 hour, sometimes it just means that my body was in a certain position for 1 hour. It doesn't tell anything about how long we meditated. We know that our body was there, and this is how we count our meditation with the clock, but actually is not sure. But still, if we can increase our formal practice, realistically, we have more opportunity to obtain some kind of progress. So maybe one problem is when we take the timings too seriously. Okay, that's one problem. But the other problem is when we start thinking that I can practice anytime. Whatever I'm doing, I'm practicing. I'm always mindful of emptiness and bodhicitta, so it doesn't matter that I sit. That I think also becomes a problem because it's usually unrealistic. for most people, I don't think that that's really the case. It's just then what happens sometimes is that we're just doing our regular business without any interest in practice, plus we label it as practice. And then we're just kind of fooling ourselves completely. So I think if we can commit to some amount of regular practice, it's much better. And I think, of course, I like it very much. I think it's worth it, but chanting is one way. Chanting is a simple way to commit a clear-cut amount of time daily. Then one can increase, and then one can do the formal meditation of shamatha, vipassana, visualization, etc. and build up. Also observe the conditions of one's life, how one can increase the time that one can devote. Like we also have to work on that. Like we can observe what is our situation in life, what kind of commitment we have, and we can try to think, what can I do so that in future, in the next few months, the next few years, such commitments don't increase, but rather they decrease, and I have more time and leisure to devote to my practice. Because if we don't do it, we just get carried away. Like we start practicing, then other things come up, and our practice becomes just few minutes every day, and okay, it's something, but we haven't done much progress. So basically it's always the long-term plan. Yeah. Ah. Yeah, that's true. There is some some plant repellents that work quite well. That is true. Yeah, that's good. Thank you. Oh, sorry. Yeah. I didn't hear your question very clearly. Yes. Yes. Well, that's a slightly complex question, because somebody could be not exactly a bodhisattva, but an emanation of a bodhisattva. Then that person will not even know it. And it might not even be a person, it could be an animal. But in other cases, to make it simpler, when we want to think that other people are bodhisattvas, we can think that they appear as if they belong to a different religion, but that's just a kind of means, an upaya, to train us in a certain way. And actually on their own side, they know very well that they are bodhisattvas on the bhumis, that they have taken up bodhicitta, etc., etc. So basically, when we think that other sentient beings are bodhisattvas, we really think that we don't know anything about their mind. that their outer behavior and what's going on inside could be as drastically different as possible. So then there is no problem with that. But generally it is a difficult question, because Bodhisattva should be somebody who has taken the Bodhicitta vow. And to take the Bodhicitta vow, can one be of a different religion? I don't think so. Because it's based on the Pratimoksha. The Pratimoksha requires taking refuge. So that is a little bit... but on the other one, then one could ask, what about previous lives when Buddhism was not there? Yeah, they take the Bodhisattva in some ways, and maybe they had taken the Pratimoksha much before. That's possible. So, yeah, it's a slightly complex thing, but that kind of imagination for us is just a means to, maybe we don't have to take it too literally. The main point of that is to understand that we should not judge negatively other people, and we should try to develop as much a positive mind towards them as possible. That, I think, is the main point of that idea. And one way is to think, okay, maybe inside they're all bodhisattvas. I don't see it, but that's just my own obscuration. You could think that you see them as people of another religion, but actually maybe it's just your own obscuration. From their own side, they're perfect bodhisattvas practicing the 6 perfections and knowing the Tripitaka, etc., etc. We just don't know very well. Okay. And you had one more question? I'm more or less same. To some extent, you could read the Jatakas. If you want to know about that, to get an idea. Why is born in the animal realm? Well, sometimes to benefit the animals. Animals also can be benefited. Some of the animals are guided by the Bodhisattva when he's born in the animal realm, and they do less non-virtue, and that helps them to be born in a better realm. So, yeah, we find a few Jatakas where the Bodhisattva is born, let's say, as a rabbit, or a Bodhisattva is born as a quail's chick, the Bodhisattva is born as a monkey, etc. But in all those cases, the Bodhisattva has unusual behavior and wisdom for an animal. So, and in the end, it ends up being very helpful, either to other animals or to some human beings, etc. So sometimes it depends from what is going to be beneficial as well. A Bodhisattvas are ready to do anything which is going to be beneficial for others. Yes. Yeah, but the hell realm, they say that when Bodhisattvas go to the hell realm, they stay there for a very, very short time, and they only feel compassion towards other sentient beings. They do not undergo the physical suffering of the hells, thanks to their Bodhicitta. So they explain about this even in the Bodhisattva Bhumi. It can happen, but it's not like an ordinary person being born there.